My favorite theme in the Bible is grace. I It's overwhelming to think that God extends, he gives grace. And if he expected something in return, I don't think it could be called grace anymore. Grace, well, I mean, I know what it means, and you do too, I'm probably pretty sure. Uh, it's unmerited favor. I couldn't earn it. I don't deserve it. There's nothing I could do. Let me put it this way: there's nothing I have ever done to deserve grace. It 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 defies the boundaries of normal human exchange. There's no quid pro quo here. There's no I do this and you do that. It's just grace is God saying, I do this. The Hebrew writer says, and we talked last time about it, verse 16, let us then approach God's throne of grace. Interesting word picture. Not a throne of justice, a throne of grace. There's a lot I could make of that, but I'm not, you get it. With confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. I love this idea. I love this promise. Well, okay. On to chapter 5. Now we're back to the theme of high priest. Every high priest is selected from among the people and is appointed to represent the people in matters related to God, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. Well, there it is. There's the specified role of the high priest. Verse 2, he is able to deal gently with those who are ignorant and are going astray, since he himself is subject to weakness. That's in the best case. The best high priests had that sensibility about them. They treat the weak with gentleness because they themselves are subject to weakness. Verse 3, this is why he has to offer sacrifices for his own sins as well as for the sins of the people. And no one takes this honor on himself, but he receives it when called by God, just as Aaron was. Now I'm going to jump off into a bunny trail. The bunny trail of calling. I have friends who had such a strong sense of calling that it trumped everything else. They talked about their calling, and they were passionate about it. Sorry. And it wasn't just this unthoughtful, emotional enthusiasm. I mean, they laid it down. They put their money where their mouth was. They left the country. They left the continent. They laid their life on the line. Others didn't leave the country. They just engaged with passion, but it wasn't just passion. So I know there is such a thing as a calling. Well, and here that, I'd be silly to deny it because here it is, right in the Bible. I've never felt a sense of calling in my life that's something I would remember. Now I've had a lot of desires and interests, but I wouldn't necessarily put those in the category of calling. In my ministry life, I have had opportunities to serve and be on staff in excuse me, in churches. Maybe the closest thing to calling was when I was the summer after my sophomore year in Bible college. I went to a little town way out in the panhandle of Oklahoma. It straddled Texas and Oklahoma, and that's how it got its name, Texhoma. Texhoma, no H, because Texhoma is way down south in Oklahoma. Anyway, I was their summer youth minister. This was way before internships were the terminology, but it was what I experienced there was when I got done, I'll put it this way, when I finished that summer youth ministry and started my junior year in college, which is lots of important things happened in my life during that summer. I got engaged to my wife, and I led kids. And when I got done, I came back to college as a junior. I thought, I want to do this. This is what I want to be. This is what I want to do. Okay, maybe that was calling. Some of it was just me saying and realizing, wow, I like doing this, and I think I'm pretty good at it. Okay, so we do, Debbie and I do this overseas ministry with Open Door Libraries. Was I called to that? Well, here's how I feel about it. We're good at it. We love doing it. It feels like we're making a difference when we do this. I was offered this role. I didn't chase it down. It was offered to me, but I see that as an opportunity that I said yes to. And I'm glad I did. It's not, okay? But I know others who have a very strong sense of calling. I envy them. And yet, I had a good run. I had about 50 years of serving, and we still serve today. It's just that it's not in a local church setting, and frankly, I kind of miss that. Okay, so that's me. Let's not make this about me. Let's make it about calling. I do have one overriding calling, and the calling was from God to accept grace. He offered it, and I am saying yes to it. So this whole thing about calling, don't know. Well, no, let me rephrase that. It's real, but I'm not sure it happens to all of us in the same way every time. Okay, but the high priest, starting with Aaron, he was the first high priest, was Moses' older brother. That, according to this, he was called by God. And in its best iteration, its best form, the high priests after him were also called. I frankly don't know the process of this calling. I wish I did. Well, okay. So what's the point? Well, the point is you don't appoint yourself as the high priest. No one takes this honor on himself. Okay. Now, before I get totally hamstrung out here on this bunny trail, let's come back to the context and the perspective here. The context is that the bigger context, Jesus is supreme. He's greater than every high priest. Then in verse 5, in the same way, Christ did not take on himself the glory of becoming a high priest. He didn't campaign for it. He didn't press for it. But God said to him, "You are my son. Today I become your father." And he says in another place, "You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek." Book of Psalms. You know, interesting thing about the Psalms are that they connect with human experience on virtually every level, and they express the human desires and emotions, and they prophesy about Christ. Okay. This particular one, if you got a footnote in your Bible, you can see it for yourself, is from Psalm 110. During the days of Jesus' life on earth, he offered up prayers and petitions with fervent cries and tears to the one who could save him from death. Well, I know when that was. That was in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he begged God, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. Well, the Hebrew writer goes on, and he was heard because of his reverent submission in the form of, nevertheless, not my will, but your will. In verse 8, son though he was, he learned obedience from what he suffered. That stinks. Because it's principle that's going to go across time. So, though he was, the son though he was, he learned obedience from what he suffered, and once made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him, and was designated by God to be high priest in the order of Melchizedek. I'm going to unpack that a teeny bit here. He learned obedience. And that's a little insight for us about Jesus. Jesus didn't just obey because it was programmed into him. He learned obedience, and he learned it through suffering. Same with us. Suffering is the school of obedience. I hate it. I don't like it. I wish it were different. But it's not different. It is what it is. There's degrees of suffering. And everybody I know has gone through some degree of suffering. Some a much more intense level of suffering. And a level that I don't know what to do about or what to say, except that you're in the graduate school of obedience. We got to come back to that. because I'm out of time. I'll see you next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.